All right, what's going on, everybody? We'll wait a few minutes for some people to join in. Professor FiddleAnthem coming live to you from Brooklyn, New York.
Professor FiddleAnthem, at your service, Dr. McGargle.
By the way, my name is Bowman1951.
Bowman1951. Good to meet you. I guess you like 1951 Bowmans.
Something like that.
Woo.
What got me back into this hobby.
Hey.
You were part of it too.
I was. Yes, little old Professor Goose Rocks long ago.
Hey, Museum of Cards, what's going on? Got a couple people joining.
Great.
We're here today to talk about, baseball cards in general, but the Negro Leagues. We've got who I'm lovingly calling Professor FiddleAnthem. This is Steve, one of my best friends. We've known each other for about 20 years now. He was in my wedding, and we're really good friends who, if you meet 1,000 people on the street, 999 of them are not going to have as much baseball knowledge as this guy right here. And that is not even exaggeration. You will see as we talk about all this, he's going to be doing a lot of the talking in general about the Negro League players and what he knows. Well-versed, well-read. Professor FiddleAnthem.
Professor FiddleAnthem.
All right, so we've got a few people in here. This will be up on the internet for a long time anyway, so people can go back and watch it later.
Excellent.
Let's just start talking about, right before we got into this, we had discussed the person who started the Negro Leagues, and I'd love to hear more about him. Would you say it was right around 1920?
Yeah, Rube Foster started the Negro Leagues in 1920. I'm not an expert on him. I can tell you that he was a very large man and was a great pitcher in his time, and over time figured out that, you know what, there's a massive market for African Americans who are sadly forced to play baseball beyond the pale of Major League Baseball. He saw that and he filled the need. I wish that I was more of a historian on him, but suffice to say, without Rube Foster, you would not have the Negro Leagues, in my opinion. Again,
Rube, R-U-B-E?
Rube Foster, yeah. Andrew Rube Foster, which is really, it's sad that he has that nickname because, obviously it took a lot of smarts to do what he did. So to call him a Rube, which is, older slang for somebody who's not very bright, smart, kind of a bumpkin, fall off the turnip truck kind of person, I don't think that's a very good personification of who he was. I think he was somebody who tried really hard to make sure that his people had an opportunity to play and that they could be seen in a positive light. And in 1920, of course, that was very, very hard to do.
Right. All right. So 1920, we've got the league starting up. Was it mainly like the Midwest from what I remember? I know there's the Kansas City Monarchs and
there were Negro, as far as I know. And again, for all of your listeners who are thinking, oh, this guy knows everything. Full disclosure, I know lots about a few players in the league and have a good general history of it, but I'm by no means, a docent at the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City, which I encourage everyone to go and check out. It's a great place. But it suffice to say that by the 20s and into the 30s, clubs were popping up across America, but the dominant ones would have been the Kansas City Monarchs, the Pittsburgh Crawfords, and the Homestead Grays. I'd say those were your big three, and the New York Cubans with Mr. Dihigo, which we'll get into later. But yeah, I mean, they had, teams in Cleveland. Boston had a couple that didn't stick. Occasionally, sadly, on eBay, you'll see these hats for the Boston Black Bees. That's really sad because they never actually existed. That's just somebody's idea of, let's make some money off some stuff that we've never heard of and be jerks about it and say that it's historical when it never actually occurred at all.
So the Homestead Grays, what city were they out of?
The Homestead Grays were out of, I believe, both Pittsburgh and Washington. Homestead was a part of Pittsburgh, and they could play their games, of course, in major league stadiums. And of course, that's why the Negro Leagues stayed active, sadly, for as long as they did. White owners, particularly Clark Griffith in Washington, understood that, he could make money renting his park and filling it, in addition to making money off of his team, the Senators. And so the Crawfords split their time, between, or the Homestead Grays rather, I believe, split their time between Washington and Pittsburgh playing at Forbes Field. But again, cross-check all this. I'm giving people a very general overlay of what it was.
Again, I've already learned something new. I've never heard of the Homestead Grays. Like I said, rather familiar with the Kansas City Monarchs, but not too many other teams and players in general. So let's just get right into some things that I know you've got to show off. Some of those hats that you have, I'd love to see some of those.
Yeah, so this is an Ebbets Field flannels hat. So I would encourage everybody who really wants a great hat. Wow, look, I really paid attention at camera angle school, didn't I? Let's see if we can get this thing to come in. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Everybody, I've been having a hard time since Mookie Betts got traded. I'm in 24-hour counseling, and I'm on new kinds of medication because, you know, I need to keep my stress down. It's really rough. And obviously, my poor Brooklyn Bushwicks hat isn't playing well today. So we're going to go ahead a little bit. We're going to go with my 1946 Montreal Royals hat. Good God almighty.
Hold it up just a little bit.
Ooh, come on, buddy.
There we go.
So this is the hat that Jackie Robinson would have worn in 1946 when he broke the color barrier in the International League with the Montreal Royals. In 1945, he spent some time with the Kansas City Monarchs. He was scouted by a gentleman named Clyde Sukeforth, who hails from Waldoboro, Maine. And Sukeforth scouted him for what Robinson was told would be a Negro League team in the U.S. Colored League that Branch Rickey was founding. That was a ruse. He was scouting him, he said, for the Brooklyn Brown Dodgers. That was not correct at all. He was, in fact, scouting him to break the color barrier. And in 1946, Robinson started his journey to the major leagues with the Montreal Royals, wearing a very close facsimile to this hat. Though, if we look at Ebbets Field flannels, they have phenomenal workmanship. And I just want to show people on the bottom, that is satin going around your hat there. So if you're looking for a really nice hat, these are top of the line. They're absolutely incredible.
Did you say that's from Mitchell and Ness?
That is not from Mitchell and Ness. This is from Ebbets Field flannels. They're out of Seattle.
Gotcha.
And the other hat that I had, Brooklyn Bushwicks, and Ebbets does a really nice job. This is an adjustable hat. I got it as a gift, and my little brother didn't know what size I was. This is the Brooklyn Bushwicks. Being a lover of the borough of Queens, I can tell you that Bushwick borders right on Queens, and these guys actually played their games in Queens. Woo-woo. Represent Queens County, go Flushing, go food, go culture and language and diversity. In any case, the Bushwicks had the distinction of being an integrated team in the 40s and 50s and 30s when they were in their heyday. So that's
where did the Montreal Royals play? You have any idea?
I do. They played at a place called the Delormier Downs. It was open until 1960 when it was raised.
Okay.
That was the name of the field. That's the unofficial name. Mm-hmm. Did have an actual name, but it certainly wasn't Jarry Park, where the Montreal Expos played their first games before moving to the wonderful craziness that was Olympic Stadium. But yeah, Delormier Downs was the name of the ballpark. Was
it in like the downtown area at all, or on the outskirts of Montreal?
I believe it was in a downtown-ish neighborhood. I wouldn't say it was right in Centreville, Montreal, but I think it was quite close. But again, you'd have to check. I have a book somewhere that says exactly where it was, but of course, if I run and do that, that's going to make this look foolish, and we don't want to do that.
Right. Yeah, I would hope there's like some kind of landmark in Montreal that might recognize it today.
Yeah, I mean, when we took our journey, to pick up your relations, it's too bad we couldn't, said, hey guys, let's wait a minute. We're going to do a baseball tour that might not mean much to you, but it means a lot to us.
Right.
But no, it's something that I definitely want to do. So hopefully that's something that we could do. Hopefully great. And what was I going to say? Hopefully it would be great to do that. Wow, I'm speaking really well today. In any case, yeah, let's continue. So ask away and we'll go from there.
So you have let's pull up your Tris speaker card.
Sure.
We're going to go into the connection there with the Negro Leagues and what that all means.
This is a 1911, or it claims to be a 1911 Mecca double folders featuring Tris speaker. And on the back here, it says Earl Gardner, but it's actually Enosburg Falls, Vermont's own Larry Gardner. And he helped the Sox win the 1912 World Series with a base hit. For those Red Sox historians, if I mixed him up with maybe it was in 1916, but I'm pretty sure it was 1912. Enosburg Falls, super small town, but here is Speaker. He was known as Spoke, also the Gray Eagle. He was Willie Mays before there was Willie Mays, and a phenomenal athlete in his own right. And very similar to a certain right fielder with 50 on his back, was actually traded to the Indians in 1916 because Fred Lannon, the Red Sox owner at the time, wouldn't pay him, like someone else I know who's will not be spoken because he's the owner named Voldemort, who took Mookie Betts away. But in any case, here's Tris Speaker. He was instrumental in helping Larry Doby to learn to play center field and indeed the outfield at Cleveland's Municipal Stadium better. The sad thing is, we know from its actual fact that Speaker was in the Klan. He was from Hubbard City, Texas. He was an intensely competitive person. He was someone who had a lot of, how to put it, he had a lot of ironies and I wouldn't say hypocrisies, but for example, he was a very dyed-in-the-wool Episcopalian, but his wife was a Catholic. But when they died, they were buried in separate cemeteries. He was a card-carrying member of the Ku Klux Klan, but later in his life saw the error of his ways and worked hard with Doby to help him, because Speaker, as much as he did great things for Boston from 1908 or 9 when he began to 1915, which was his last year when the Red Sox beat the Phillies, and Babe Ruth said that was the greatest team he'd ever played on. Speaker spent the majority of his best years in Cleveland, and he helped the Indians win a World Series in 1920, along with this guy, Larry Gardner, at third base. But what few folks know is how helpful he was to Doby, apparently, in helping him acclimate to the major leagues, and most importantly, to acclimate to the cavernous confines that made up Municipal Stadium, as it was a very large place. I mean, it had the dubious nickname of the Mistake by the Lake. It had been built by the Indians, or by the city of Cleveland, rather, in hopes that they would get the 1936 Olympics. So the city fathers in Cleveland felt, oh, we'll just build this really, really large stadium and we'll get the Olympics. Well, Berlin got the Olympics and Cleveland didn't. And that's what happened. But that's how they got Municipal Stadium. Hooray!
Cleveland, to me, just does not seem like a Olympics type of city. Maybe back in the 30s, I don't know, but
we did go and we had a phenomenal time. Let's be fair. And the mustard for the sausage for my brat was particularly good. And the game was so good that we usually like to get up and walk around in parks that we've never been to, you and I. And what was I going to say? What is your nickname that you go by in
Bowman1951?
And Bowman1951 is my anthem manager. So I've been performing the national anthem on my violin or my fiddle since 2002. And Bowman1951 is my de facto manager. And we have journeyed all over New England to Florida and beyond for various anthem gigs. And we have traipsed many a ballpark together. And that game went so quickly with Corey Kluber that neither of us got a chance to get up and walk around. It was that fast.
So FiddleAnthem here is talking about the 2018 National Sports Card Convention in Cleveland. And we attended an Indians game that night. Saw Shohei Ohtani for the first time, which is really nice. Mike Trout was actually hurt that night, but it was nice. Really nice to see Ohtani. And so anyway, we've got Modern Vintage Collector here saying the Grays did split time between those two. So we're just going back on something you had said, and we got clarification there on that.
Yeah.
Here is my Larry Doby.
Ooh, that's
1951.
That's a nice 1951 Larry Doby. Indeed so. Wow.
So there's the tie-in again with Tris Speaker and Larry Doby. All right, so I think we're going to move on to I always butcher his name, Dihigo.
Martin Dihigo. It's like Diego, but I mean, I've heard it Dihigo, but I think it has a special pronunciation. But I just saw that maybe 2 or 3 days ago. So again, it's it's not quite in my bag of tricks just yet. Not quite.
All right,
yet.
So Martin Dihigo. Let's talk about him and his impact on the Negro Leagues.
So he was truly. I mean, and you can get in all kinds of trouble for calling people the greatest player of all time. Of course, folks would say, well, Colin Cowherd once pointed out, it's great to talk about the Hall of Fame in the 20s, 30s, teens, and, early 20th century. But of course, it wasn't the best talent in America because baseball was so rigorously segregated. Martin Dihigo is arguably the greatest player to ever play the game. He was a phenomenal pitcher. He was a all-star caliber player at all 9 positions. His stats are otherworldly. He played for years and years from the late 20s into the late 40s. His 2 nicknames were El Inmortal, which means the immortal, or El Maestro, which means the master. Minnie Minoso credited him with everything that he wanted to be in baseball. In other words, Minoso completely idolized him. When Johnny Mize was playing in the winter ball in the it had to be the late 40s, he said, yeah, I did pretty well, but this Dihigo guy, man, he hit better than me. Oh, and he pitched and he did all these things. And Dihigo was a phenomenal athlete. And I mean, here's the proof in the pudding. He's the only player in the, wait for it, here we go, American, Cuban, Dominican, Venezuelan, and Mexican baseball halls of fame.
I remember you telling me that. That just blew me away. If
we think about that, that's pretty incredible. He also played for clubs in Cuba. In the Negro Leagues, he played for the New York Cubans in 47. If I could get a 1947 Cubans hat, I would get it and wear it proudly. He became Castro's Minister of Sports. So after Castro took power in Cuba, he was, and I don't know one way or the other, but I believe he was able to keep his head down and was named the Minister of Sport and lived happily in Cuba. He died in 1971, but in 77, ironically, the year that I was born. So little FiddleAnthem, wah wah. Well, unfortunately, fortunately, he was inducted to the Hall of Fame, but sadly, it was 6 years after he passed away. But he in the
what is his contribution to the major leagues? Is there anything there in particular? Did he have a channel or a pipeline of players where he was looking to send to the majors, anything like that?
I mean, Dihigo, I don't believe was a manager. I mean, if you're
no, not a manager per se, but being the Ministry of Sport in Cuba, did he funnel any players to America to play?
I wouldn't think so.
Or attempt to, at least.
After Castro took power, that was cut off completely.
Okay.
So, for example, when Louis Tiant, he came up actually with the Indians. And when he was pitching well with the Indians before he blew his arm out, he was basically told, right, you're in America. We've taken power. You can either come home or you can stay and never see your family again. Have fun.
Wow.
And so he did not see his mom and dad again until Castro gave them permission to come to Game 1 of the 1975 series where El Tiante threw a shutout. And it was the first time he'd seen his parents since he left to play baseball in the 60s, the late 50s, early 60s. Incredible. Yeah. So he went through a lot. And Dihigo was someone who was just, I think, drew people to him. His son has written a biography about him, which I haven't read, which I would very much like to. And as early as the 30s or 40s, and again, read the book by the son to get the initial correct years that he thought about this. But as far as I can tell, he was telling his son as early as the 30s, he was thinking to himself, wow, baseball's long. We've got to find a way to shorten it up. Can we put a ghost man on first and then second and third and so on to speed the game up so that people can, go to bed at a reasonable hour so you can wrap the game up in a reasonable time frame. So right. Dihigo is very much someone who is almost entirely unknown. But if you look at who he was and what he represented and what he could have done, if he had been able to play somewhere like Boston, there's no doubt in my mind that the Red Sox would have won several championships. Or if you put him in New York in the 50s, or if you put him with the Dodgers, or if you stuck him with the Cardinals in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I mean, the Gas House Gang Cardinals with this guy pitching and hitting, forget it. I mean, it's insane.
What was his prominent team in the Negro Leagues?
I mean, he pitched everywhere he pitched, from the Negro Leagues to.
Well, what team was he on? I'm sorry, I think I missed that.
He was on many teams. He was on, I believe, Cienfuegos in the Cuban League, but principally in the U.S., he was on the New York Cubans.
All right. Hey, we've got a question coming in here from Modern Vintage Collector. I came in late. Have you guys discussed William White, Fleet Walker, or Octavius Catto?
Octavius Catto. So William White, I have heard of. Fleet Walker was a catcher for the Toledo Blue Stockings, I believe. So Modern Vintage Collector, do correct me if I'm wrong. Best of luck to your Indians. I hope they win. And what was I going to say? It would be nice if they finally won and gave the city of Cleveland something it's been waiting for since 1948. I have heard of Fleet Walker. He was a phenomenal player that, thanks to Cap Anson, in 1884 was banned from baseball. So he, in fact, William White also, I think, predates. Goodness gracious, Fleet Walker, and as the first African American to play. So Octavius Catto or Cato, I've never heard of, but William White I have heard of, and certainly Fleet Walker. His name was Moses Fleetwood, hence the nickname Fleet Walker. All right. And he was a catcher at a time when they had no gloves. It was just the hand. Have fun with that.
All right, we're going to move back up to the 50s, and I got a few cards out. We're going to talk about Mr. Henry Thompson here. So let's hear what you know about him. FiddleAnthem and his stint on the Giants in the late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah, Henry Thompson, unlike Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby, of course, with Cleveland, quietly integrated the Giants in 1949. In 1949, the Giants were mostly hit a lot of home runs, no pitching club, and so Thompson fit right into that. I don't know a lot about him. I know that he played for them for a bit, but of course, it was really Willie Mays who came up in 51, as well as Piper Davis, who was his sort of advisor, who came up to acclimate him. And Piper Davis was a former Negro League player who had been tearing up AAA and later went on to play in the Red Sox organization. But of course, they, in their stupidity, never brought him up. And that's a story for another time. But Thompson, I believe, was a pretty good player. But like a lot of the folks in the Negro Leagues that weren't named Jackie Robinson or Monty Irvin or Roy Campanella, he had an okay career, but he did not become a household name. But he did, in fact, integrate the New York Giants. The important thing about the New York Giants to know was, though, that Horace Stoneham, the owner, knew that he needed a way to generate revenue, and he began to talk with Alex Pompez or Pompey. I don't know how to say his name. I do speak Spanish pretty well, but Alex Pompez was, I believe, a Cuban-American or Puerto Rican, one of the two, I believe Cuban, and he was instrumental in advising Stoneham on players he should scout. And ironically, Mays could have been a Red Sox player, but the Red Sox didn't want him based on what he looked like. And the mind boggles with Ted Williams and Willie Mays in the same outfield. And when the Red Sox passed on him, and the reason was their farm club at the time, one of them was in Mobile, Alabama, and Birmingham, Alabama. And there were the Birmingham Barons, and then there were the Negro Leagues Birmingham Black Barons, where Willie Mays was playing. And because the Red Sox had an agreement with the Birmingham Barons, they also had first dibs on Birmingham Black Barons players. The Red Sox passed on Mays, and Stoneham saw this along with some combination of Alex Pompez and or scouts in the Giants front office, and they snapped him up, and the rest is history. But again, much like Dihigo, the mind boggles as to what could have been had Tom Yawkey not been a virulent racist, and the Red Sox could have set the standard instead of being a horrible example of racism in its worst form.
What year did Yawkey? Did he die while he was owner of the Red Sox, or what?
He did.
Was he gone?
He smoked cigars quite thoroughly throughout his life, and in 1976 he passed away from leukemia, brought on most likely, and I'm no doctor, but he drank hard, and his rule was if he liked you, you'd go drink with him, and he wanted his managers and his management to be drinking buddies, and so he'd drink hard and he smoked cigars hard. He was also very racist. And
he was the owner when he brought up Pumpsy in like 60s?
Yeah. Elijah Pumpsy Green was brought up in 59. But again, could have, should have been Piper Davis. Jackie Robinson had a sham tryout with the Red Sox in 1945, where very sadly, Sam Jethro, who we'll talk about in a minute, was also at that tryout. And Robinson tried to show the Red Sox his power and hit a lot of balls off the left field wall. Jethro tried the same thing. And in 45, the tryout happened because a Boston city councilor, Isidore Munchenik, said, listen, baseball needs to integrate. You know, it's not okay for people of color to be able to die in places like Okinawa and Iwo Jima and not be able to play baseball. So we said to the Red Sox and the Braves, listen, I want you, if I can have a tryout, can you at least have a tryout? And let's get this going. Because if you don't have a tryout, Red Sox and or Braves, I will jerk your Sunday ability to sell beer. And
wow,
is a problem, right? And some people would say, well, Munchnick made a big deal because he knew that Roxbury and Dorchester were all, you know, they were having more and more African Americans, and he was just doing it as a publicity stunt. Not at all. At that point, Roxbury was very much Irish American, as was Dorchester. So Izzy Munchnick went out on a limb. He was Jewish American, phenomenally talented guy. He was an architect and could have been working with, you know, great architectural firms that were Yankee architectural firms, but they always came to him and said, no, well, you can't have Munchnick as your last name. You'll have to take up a pseudonym. And Munchnick, a very proud man, said, absolutely not. And to his day, stayed that way. And in testament to Izzy Munchnick, he did get the tryout to happen, and he worked with Sam Lacey and Wendell Smith, two of the foremost African-American sports writers for the Pittsburgh Courier and Baltimore African-American, the two biggest African-American papers, and indeed with the biggest sports sections. And they had a tryout, but at some point during that tryout and within the first 2 weeks of April 1945, somebody, either Yaki or the GM of the Red Sox at the time, Joe Cronin, said, get those N-bombs off the field. And a chance to do better and just be better was completely obliterated. And to his dying day, Robinson harbored a great deal of resentment towards Joe Cronin. To give you an idea, in 1967, the Red Sox won the World Series. I wish they'd have won.
Be careful.
They won the pennant. They won the pennant, and sadly, they fell to the Cardinals in 7 games in 1967. But during the World Series, Robinson was asked, you know, hey, are you pulling for the Red Sox? Because, you know, they were a very young, integrated team, very, very fun to watch. But of course, the president of the American League at that time was Joe Cronin. Robinson apparently got icily quiet and hissed something to the effect of, I really don't care what happens, but I want the Red Sox to lose. The Braves, in fact, immigrated way before the Red Sox in 1950 with Sam Jethro. So Jethro went on to win the National League Rookie of the Year. He was from East St. Louis, Illinois.
I'm sorry to cut you off there. Let's hold off on him because we're going to show off some of your cards.
Good stuff
from that area. We've got another question coming in here. I want you to help out Modern Vintage Collector here at the bottom. Yeah. Is it true that Roy Campanella was Branch Rickey's first choice to break the color barrier?
I heard that Rickey called him, but he thought it was a prank and hung up on him, so he called Jackie. I believe actually Monty Irvin was his choice. And what happened was Irvin, and I've got an Irvin right here. This is a 54 Topps Irvin, I swear. There we go. There's Monty. Monty was the first choice, but unfortunately, he was very ill. As a result, they wanted to look for somebody who could do a good job. And really, not do a good job. That's the wrong way to say it. Somebody who, you know, as it's been said, had a great deal of competitive fire, but the guts not to fight back. He certainly had temper control that I could only dream of. But I believe that Campanella was thought about, but I couldn't guarantee that he was called by Rickey. In my research, I've never seen that. But again, that's something that you could easily find through the archives at either the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown or the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City.
You never know with movies like 42, you know, how much of it's actual legit, you know, discussions with players and managers and team owners and whoever else. But, you know, a lot of that can be misleading. I don't know if it's from 42 or where that's been heard, but never use a movie as your history lesson.
No, you don't want to do that. It doesn't tend to end well.
All right, so you're getting requests to show off some your cards there, FiddleAnthem. So let's get into some of the late 40s, early 50s African American players.
So because I collect Boston Braves cards, I'm 43 years of age, but I've been collecting Boston Braves cards since I was 14 years old. And so Sam Jethro is the guy that broke the color barrier with the Braves.
What year was that?
1950. And I'm about to get his rookie card if I could find it. There it is. This is a 1950 Bowman Sam Jethro rookie card. I'm going to flip it over so you can see the back. It's not a repro. This Bowman set is the only one to have that 5-star series logo. I actually don't know why that is. If anyone does know, please do tell me. I've always been interested as to why that was the only set with that particular moniker on it. This is a 1951 Bowman Sam Jethro. Ta-da.
That is beautiful.
It's a gorgeous card. It is a gorgeous card.
I think that's a 52.
Yes, it's the 52. Ha ha.
I know the 51 rather well. I was like, wait a minute, I don't recognize that picture.
Nope. That's a 52. So here we go. We're gonna try again. This is the 51 because it's got his name.
There you go. That's better.
What was I gonna say?
So let's talk a little bit about Sam Jethro. His he had a Negro League career, I assume.
He did.
Talk a little bit about that.
He did. He played for the Indianapolis Clowns. One of the things about the Negro Leagues was some of the names, I mean, in today's society are just, racist in their own ways, as if, the folks in Indianapolis who are African-American were clowns when that certainly wasn't the case. This card is 1951 Burke Ross. It's one of his very first cards, and it shows him in a Dodger hat because he, in fact, was property of the Dodgers, and the Braves picked him up, much like Roberto Clemente, although I don't believe that Sam Jethro came in the Rule 5 draft like Clemente did. A lot of people don't know that he was Dodger property, and the Pirates picked him up via the Rule 5 draft.
Wow. That's something I just learned. I had no idea.
So here's some details about Sam. Right there he is.
A little tough to see, but
yeah. So he was the outfielder for the Boston Braves. He was the National League Stolen Base champion and Rookie of the Year. He was born in East St. Louis, Illinois on the 20th of January, 1922. He batted and threw with his right hand. He was 6'1", weighed 178 pounds. He had 273 in 1950 and stole 35 bases for Lou Perini's Boston Braves.
Nice.
And if I have 1 second, I have a Braves hat that's a repro, but this is not a repro. This is a original Boston Braves pennant dating from about 1946 to 1952. Trying to show it off as best I can. But this is my pride and joy.
Did you get that at the National also, or is that?
Oh, I got this on eBay for all of $50. $50. And so with my collection, as you know, I do sell or trade things, but I really view it as a museum where I'm, really the curator of things that have come to me from other people. And out of respect for those folks, I keep the stuff in my collection. I do move things occasionally, but it's really like a museum. So out of respect.
I feel that way about vintage cards. When I buy one, you're not buying it to flip because it's increased in value 50% year to year. So
no, not at all. And even if you look behind me, you'll see a New York Giants throwback pennant made by Mitchell and Ness. And I think, and this is good, just to show how we have a long way to go as a society, but we're going further. This was done by the Hillsborough Hops for the Copa de Diversión, which was the Latino.
Move that a little bit more towards the camera. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, this is the hat that the Hillsborough Hops wore for the Copa de Diversión to increase Latino participation in minor league baseball. And the name isn't quite sueños, but that's what it roughly translates to. So dreams. So this was a logo created to talk about how dreams and just the willingness to succeed have helped Latino folks throughout Oregon and indeed throughout the world to be successful. And I love this wolf moniker because it's so cool and regal looking and it just looks really neat. And it just shows how far we've come. Obviously, we have a long way to go, but the fact that minor league baseball has been doing this says a lot. Do we have to go much further? Absolutely. I think, and just going back to the modern part of things, I think that the Red Sox trading Betts, with all due respect to the people of Los Angeles, they have many African-American superstars. The people of Boston, and indeed young folks today around Boston and in New England, need a really positive African-American role model, and Betts provided that. And for him to be traded just makes absolutely no sense. And I swear that's it. I'm done. And John, if you're listening,
you don't have to talk about Betts per se, but I was reading some stats today. Only 7.7% of the entire major leagues is African American now.
Oh, yeah.
And 3 teams have no African Americans, and something like 11 have only 1 player. You know what to attribute that to? I've read, it's the development costs and so forth, but I don't know if they're choosing, other sports like basketball or football, but I feel like we've definitely seen a decline of African Americans over the years.
Absolutely.
Coming up to the major leagues.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not African American. I can say I've worked with African American youth, and I have African American friends, and I've talked to them. Though most of my African American friends don't follow baseball, and they don't for a variety of reasons. But I think, in my own experiences as a baseball historian, I can say I think it's twofold. One, African Americans, Major League Baseball has done a garbage job of marketing to African Americans. Has it improved? Yes. But right now in minor league baseball, for example, at last check, there were 4 GMs of color in all of minor league baseball. That to me is chicanery, foolishness, and something that needs to not be happening. There have got to be plenty of candidates of color, women, LGBTQ, and yes, people with disabilities who could certainly be phenomenal GMs if they were given the opportunity. Also, with the system of Buscones in central, and I don't want to say central, but southern North America, and the cheapness of developing talent from the DR, Venezuela, et cetera, African Americans initially came about because Branch Rickey, or the integration really came about. Yeah, Branch Rickey wanted to do the right thing, but he knew he was competing with the Yankees juggernaut. And he understood that if he could tap into African Americans, they would come out in droves and support him, the Dodgers, and it was amazing branding. And literally, there were Jackie Robinson specials that would take people in their Sunday best from, Georgia, Tennessee, wherever, to as far west as St. Louis, wherever the Dodgers were playing, and they'd show up and pack the park. And the saying was, Jack's nimble, Jack's quick, and Jack's making the turnstiles click. And once that changed, right, once integration happened, it was great. And you had people like Dick Allen and people like Reggie Jackson. My father's probably going to disown me, but Reginald Martinez Jackson, for all of his bluster, was one heck of a good ball player.
Of course. And
he grew up.
Like we can admit to Jeter now. Once he's gone from the team, he's not up against our Red Sox anymore.
Exactly. He was a nice guy. And hey, I always liked Bernie Williams. I always thought Bernie baseball was really cool. Right. At the end of the day, though, I think the NBA, it's cheaper to play basketball, plain and simple. To play baseball, you've got equipment, then you got travel teams, then you have fees for those teams. You've got to pay for your uniform. You got to pay dues. You got to pay for food. And you have these travel teams going all over the place. And this is just me speaking as John Q fan. For all I know, half of what I'm saying is incorrect. So if I'm incorrect, please do tell me. I'm an atypical man, and then I always preface everything with, I could be full of fluff, so please do check. But in my experience, MLB and minor league baseball, yes, they've done a great deal better in terms of diversity. If you look at the work of Vince Pearson, who is now in another capacity in the corporate world in diversity and inclusion, Vince did a phenomenal job. If you look at the work of Harold Craw with the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, or Cookie Rojas with the recently relocated New Orleans Baby Cakes. They're now in Wichita. I don't know what the heck their name is. They've all done a phenomenal job. And there are 2 other guys who I don't know as well. Their names escape me at the minute. But there is progress being made, but that progress, I think, is not nearly where it needs to be. But I think it's also tough because now people are always looking at their phones. They don't want to play. They want instant. There's work that comes with being an athlete, but it's also too just the cost of everything that goes into being a ball player. And where before, it was your way out, right? But when baseball was king, you couldn't make buku money in the NBA or the NFL, to say nothing of Major League Soccer. But I think, baseball has to really do a hard look at itself. And for all the detractors that are saying, hey, they want to cut these minor league teams. Well, it's great that that's happening in some ways. Not that it's great that those teams are being cut, but for the first time, minor league baseball is finally saying, yep, we need to give people a decent wage with health benefits. But with that, similar to the Negro Leagues, now all of a sudden, all these players that were playing at lower levels are being told, we found that we can do this on the cheap and we don't need you guys. So sorry, not take a hike, but sorry, we tried this, didn't work out, we're going to move on. And it's very similar, to the Negro Leagues finally folding in 55 because they were a victim of their own success. So I'm
going to interrupt you there. We've got a comment here from Snoop12922 talking about Ray Dandridge was the first choice, but he turned him down because he felt he was too old. Yeah. So I just wanted to mention here, Snoop is one of the, unfortunately, only African Americans in the baseball card collecting community that I know of. So we've got a problem there, not only with players in the MLB, but it's just people of color that are interested in even the hobby side of things.
Yeah.
But thank you for your comment, Snoop. I just wanted to point that out. I really appreciate you joining in on this conversation tonight. Again, if we've got any more questions for our professor here of baseball knowledge and baseball history, feel free to throw them out. We're about 40 minutes in here, and I guess like I said, we'll open up to questions. I just wanted to show off one thing that we got from the National together, and I'm very proud of.
Oh, yeah.
Pumpsy Green autograph.
Yep.
Who probably passed away last year, and Pumpsy's no longer with us.
And actually, if you want to, Bowman1951, if you want to get a good view of him on the show As It Happens or Out in the Open, one of the two on CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, through their online app, I was able to listen to an interview with Pumpsy Green's daughter. Pumpsy, I believe, was from, I want to say either Mississippi or the Bay Area, but I believe the Bay Area initially. But his daughter certainly lives there. But his daughter talked with the host of the show about her father. And I thought that was really great, particularly because it was Canada.
What was this on again? I want to try to catch it.
It's either Out in the Open or as
like a podcast.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it using my phone, which might be somewhere useful. But I can certainly get the info to you. Yeah, here we go. I'll see if I can find it. But yeah, it was a phenomenally well done, short to the point showing of who Elijah was as a person. And he was a nice guy that was a ball player. I can tell you that when he did come to Boston, and a lot of the info guys that I'm talking about comes from the work, and I'd be so remiss if I didn't mention this, the work of Howard Bryant, who is a phenomenal sports writer, written for the Bergen County Record. I believe he's still working for ESPN. After that, he went to work for the San Jose Mercury News, but he grew up in Dorchester, Mass. And as he was growing up, he noticed that none of his African-American relations were Red Sox fans. They rooted for the Cardinals, the Dodgers, the Braves, teams that embraced African-Americans. And rightly so for them to not root for the Red Sox, to be perfectly candid. But Bryant wrote a great book, best book I've ever read, about history, civil rights, or baseball, all rolled into one, called Shut Out, A History of Race and Baseball in Boston. He has a later issue that talks about 2004 and how that changed things. But in truth, if you want to really dig into just the insidious nature of racism, why the Red Sox and indeed why Major League Baseball on the whole had to be dragged kicking and screaming towards integration, read the book. You'll learn about Izzy Munchnick. You'll learn about people like Efemani. I know I'm saying her name wrong. I'm sorry. I feel badly because Jeff Idelson, former president of the Baseball Hall of Fame, is a friend, and I feel like I'm letting Jeff and other folks that I know named Jeff down by completely destroying her her name. She was somebody who, a woman. She was biracial, and she could pass for both worlds, as it went back then. And that saying that is not the greatest saying by any stretch, but she was a phenomenally interesting person who, much like Rube Foster, tried to do the best she could to make the world better for her players. And she ran the Newark Eagles. And unlike Robinson, who was quickly sold from the Monarchs, Efemeni made sure to dicker hard with dear old Branch Rickey, who was very tight with his nickels on getting top dollar for Roy Campanella and others from the Newark Eagles that he had his eye on, if you will.
All right, we got a question coming in here from Ron Fig. Do you think today's locker room environment in baseball is comfortable or inviting? I believe he's referencing African-American players in general. It seems different than football and basketball.
I think it's real. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I have cerebral palsy. I have a disability. So I'm a minority in my own way. The unemployment rate for people with disabilities is north of 60%. It's 2020. We'll just leave that statistic there. And so I have a lot of empathy for African Americans. While I could never know what they go through, I can certainly empathize in many ways. With that said, when you look at the sheer lack of African Americans in locker rooms, how can it be anything other than uncomfortable? You're playing in places where you look around and nobody's looking like you. No, nobody that you know is around you. Not nobody that you know, but nobody else is even looking like you. How isn't that uncomfortable or off-putting or just plain wrong? It is just unconscionable to me that, it's gotten the way that it has. I mean, not unconscionable because I understand the reasons for it, and it shouldn't have been allowed to happen, but it has happened. But I think it's a very different environment than football, because I think football really is America's pastime. With all due respect to baseball, if it's going to stay relevant, it needs to work harder. It needs to work a lot harder, and it needs to do much more to address and listen to African Americans and Latinos or Latinx, indeed people with disabilities, people who are LGBTQ, but especially to African American ball players. I mean, I would, if I had, $1 million and I could ask somebody to give me a call, I'd love to sit down with Tony Clark, the former Tigers and Yankees player who is so well respected across baseball, who's now the head of the union, and say to him, what can fans do? What can we do to help owners stop this foolishness? And GMs to, not that they can stop the foolishness, but for heaven's sakes, to make it more welcoming and to find ways to build bridges, because there once were bridges, but now those bridges, to be candid, seem like they no longer exist, or if they do exist, they're falling apart.
What do you know about the Detroit Tigers slow integration?
The Tigers slow integration actually ties in very well with Tom Yawkey. The Briggs family, Tom Yawkey's parents passed away, and Briggs was his guardian. And Tom Yawkey learned the insidiousness of racism through his idol, Ty Cobb, who they would go hunting with. And Briggs was an out-and-out racist. If it wasn't Briggs, it was another owner of the Tigers. But that gentleman had a profound impact on young Tom Yawkey. Whereas if Tom Yawkey perhaps was mentored by someone more along the lines of Branch Rickey or Alex Pompey or Efemeni, what could he have accomplished? And, for all those folks that say, well, there's the Fetzer Yawkey wing at the Hall of Fame, and there's the Yawkey Center, or the Yawkey Foundation, rather, and Yawkey gave so much money to Dana-Farber. Yes, that's true. He did. But he also allowed insidious racism to stay around far too long. In fact, it never should have existed in the first place. But he was the last team to integrate, and that is my undying shame at being a Red Sox fan. I love my team.
Same here.
But they were bigots. They were bigots, and they didn't win because they were bigoted. And they just sent their best African-American player in a generation off to another team because they wouldn't pay him. Sorry, but I don't think that's right. I would have paid him $500 million straight up.
Yep. Well,
Sorry,
we won't get on the business side of things, but any other questions coming in out there?
Thank you, Modern Vintage Collector. It's a good day when Walter Briggs left this earth. Yeah. Ozzie Virgil. Wow.
Ozzie Virgil. Well, didn't he play in the 70s and 80s?
He did. I don't know who the first player in Detroit was. I'd have to think. But in terms of other players like Dihigo that your viewers, listeners, I don't know what you call your video blog audience, I guess. Your loyal listeners, Bowman1951, your Bowmanites, if you will.
There you go.
There's lots of players that are really worth looking into that don't get all the sunshine and the roses. One of them is Willie Wells. They called him Willie Devil Wells. He was a phenomenal shortstop for the St. Louis Stars of the Negro Leagues. You also had Cool Papa Bell, Oscar Charleston, Luke Easter. Read, if you really want to dig into the Negro Leagues, read I Was Right on Time by Buck O'Neill. I'm going to see if I have it sitting on my bookshelf. I'm looking over for it.
We just got an answer, by the way, on Ozzie Virgil. Came into the league in 1958.
I believe,
and then he was in 60. Were those the last two teams, the Tigers and the Red Sox?
Yeah, I believe so. And funny enough, of course, the Red Sox often traded with who? The Tigers. Yeah. But I'm just going to go to my bookshelf here. And no, this isn't a plant. And Bowman1951 knows that, yes, I actually do have these books. I didn't run out and buy them all for this.
You are a historian for good reason.
I'm a historian. And oh, look, I found what I need. Woohoo. All right, here we go. Line them up, kids. Let's see here. Good gracious. There we go. So here's some really great books on baseball, for all of you guys who have, this thing called spare time. We used to have that before the internet and social media. Here is Buck's book, and this is Buck O'Neill, and he became famous in 1994 for being the voice of the Negro Leagues for Ken Burns. And this is a great book, phenomenal, and a great look at Negro League history. Some of the stuff that he writes about, like he writes about being with Robinson in 1945, he wasn't quite with him. He was actually in the service in the Navy in 1945 while Robinson was in Kansas City. But aside from a few, faux pas like that, it's a phenomenal read, one of the best. This is a great book about Tris Speaker. This can show you really well what kind of competitor he was. Speaker, to me, actually has a really big place in my heart in the sense that when he was with Cleveland, he actually did a lot for the city of Cleveland and actually developed a camp called Camp Cheerful, specifically for kids with cerebral palsy in 1930s Ohio in Cleveland. And while it's very medical modelly, like, yeah, we're going to cure the poor kids with disabilities, or heaven forbid, what they would have called me back then, the poor crippled kids, Speaker at least was trying to do something about it at a time when very few people were, to be candid. Here's a biography of Roberto Clemente. He died way too soon, trying to do the right thing by bringing supplies to people that weren't getting them in Somoza's Nicaragua. He was a dictator and a real stinker. But in addition to being a phenomenal ball player, Clemente, of course, was a great human being. This is Howard Bryant's other book, The Life and Times of Henry Aaron. Phenomenal read. And here's Opening Day about Jackie Robinson. But my absolute favorite, Racing Baseball in Boston Shutout, is somewhere in my parents' basement. And I really
next time I'm down in Brooklyn, I am borrowing at least one or two of those books.
Or I could just give some to you, and I could mail them to you. What a
Well,
novel.
we'll talk offline, but I'm coming down shortly.
Okay. Well, I mean, you're quite busy right now, but as you see fit, Bowman1951.
Baby can travel well now. He's getting old enough.
Are you sure? All right. Well, I mean, you gotta check with the boss. I mean, I don't want you doing anything that might get you, exiled to, say, the wilds of Iowa, northern Minnesota, the back of beyond in Newfoundland.
On that note, do you want to end with anything in regards to the Negro Leagues, or you know what? I did want to talk about your let's throw it to the side. Those cards that you've shown us. Actually, did you show the 53 Bowman color?
I didn't. Thank you.
Bring that up.
This is a great one. These pictures, I only know this because I own a 1952 Boston Braves yearbook. It was their last year in Boston. These pictures that I've seen in the yearbook were actually taken at the Polo Grounds, I believe, or actually that's the 51-52 set, so ignore what I just said. But this is the 53 Bowman color set. And they were the Milwaukee Braves by that point, by the second week of March. So some of them say Boston Braves on the back, and others say Milwaukee Braves, but they all have a B on the hat because when the Braves moved, the clubhouse people didn't know whether they were going back to Boston or indeed moving to Milwaukee because Lou Perini was able to keep it so hush-hush. Was
Monty Irvin the second player to integrate with the Braves?
Monty Irvin came in with the Giants. For the Braves.
Was that Jethro? I'm sorry.
Jethro was the first one. There was another guy, George Crow.
No, who was on the 53 Bowman card there? Who?
That's a Jethro. This is a 53 Bowman colored Jethro.
Gotcha. I was thinking it was Monty Irvin. My apologies.
That's okay. That's okay. And this is his 52 Topps one, which I like a lot. He's got a big smiling face and looks like he's having a good time.
Ron, Professor FiddleAnthem here does not have a YouTube channel. He writes some blogs on LinkedIn.
I do.
But, we've been good friends for about 20 years, and I know him as the most well-versed baseball historian that I could ever bring on this channel. And
yeah, we've been friends technically for 17 years. Can you believe that? That's a long time.
Yep, we met the day the shuttle exploded in 2002.
Yeah, and there was a massive.
Almost 18 years ago.
Yeah. That was my first day at work. Columbia blew up. I came to work, space shuttle blew up. I guess I'm not very good luck.
All right, so we got one more comment here. It's a travesty that Buck isn't in the Hall of Fame. At least they have the Buck O'Neil Lifetime Achievement Award from the Hall.
Yeah, I think it is an absolute disgusting travesty that he was not in the Hall of Fame. The man grew up incredibly poor in Florida. And literally, if you read his book, you'll see that he talks about he was 14, should have been in school, wasn't, cutting celery in the heat and the humidity. And he looked at his father and he said, there's got to be something better than this. He said, there is, but you're not going to find it here. And O'Neil was a very good ball player. And indeed, he was the first African-American scout for the Chicago Cubs at a time when the Cubs themselves, and God help the Cubs, they finally won one. And shout out to Theo Epstein, a very cool individual as far as I know. And I will say that in my own life, it's great that Buck has what he has, but yeah, he should be in the Hall of Fame. And in fact, when he was voted down while he was still living, Henry Aaron was, just absolutely livid. Other people were livid, but he said, oh, hey, I wonder if they'll invite me to speak again. So I think the lesson of Buck O'Neil rings true, but it's okay to be a little more, to push a little harder, because I think, especially in this America today, with so many people looking to build walls around each other, the Negro Leagues were all about trying to build bridges and creating something of a better America, and not one that was lily white, but one that was diverse, where talent and what was between your ears and between in your rib cage here, your heart and your brain, that those things were important, not what you looked like or where you came from or who your father was, where your mother was. And to move away from Buck O'Neil's example is to really embrace a much darker, more elitist, racist version of America that no one should ever embrace, because then we just make the mistakes of the past over and over again. And indeed, the message of people like Buck O'Neil gets lost. So yeah. And more importantly, he was the standard bearer in 1994. I don't know the story of how Ken Burns, good old Ken Burns from Walpole, New Hampshire, he's had the same silly haircut since who knows when, but boy, he knows how to put out those documentaries. They're great. But somehow Ken Burns was connected to Mr. O'Neil, and he just opened up and was a fountain of knowledge about the Negro Leagues, down to the clothes they wore, what they did, how they did it, how they dealt with everything. And if you listen to Buck and you listen to his story, it really is, you got to give it up and you got to give people love. But there's also I don't want to say slight bitterness, but a river of sadness and anger. And there should have been. And I'm going to say rage and just white hot anger that it took so long. It never should have happened. Martin Dihigo should have been playing for the Red Sox in the 20s. Then we wouldn't have to worry about the curse of Babe Ruth. Right. And maybe, especially today, it's 2020. Look what we're doing to ourselves. I don't like to make it political, but sports and life, they intersect a lot. So let's make sure when they intersect that we give everybody a shot and we remember the people that came before and we honor their sacrifices and have knowledge about them.
Amen.
That was pretty good. Ooh.
Yeah, it was. Good job, Professor. You're getting a call here. I can listen to you all day.
But I brought it home.
All right. So last topic I wanted to talk about, your 3 favorite African-American baseball card vintage sets or just
good
in general. You can't use any of the examples you have out there in front of you.
You
want me to go first?
Well, I mean, I don't know of any Negro League cards. I was just.
I didn't mean Negro League cards. African American cards. But vintage.
Well, my favorite vintage ones, if I had a limitless supply of dead presidents in my wallet that would just keep coming and coming, definitely a 1955 Topps Robinson. Definitely a 1954 Topps Henry Aaron. 1954 Topps Clemente. I do have a 1954 Topps Maze. It's like $100. It's not a very good one, but I got one. Woo woo! I can die in a state of grace. What else? My father would kill me if I said Bob Gibson in 1959, but he is a really cool ball player. But my father would kill me, so I can't say that. So my father's going to watch this, and then I'm going to have to be careful and hire security.
I'll give you mine. I'm going with the 53 Topps Campanella.
Oh, goodness gracious me. How could I be such a chucklehead? Yes.
Absolutely love that card. We got the 59 Topps Gibson rookie card.
Yeah.
Another classic. And you can't leave off I think it's the 48, right? Satchel Paige. Is it a 48 or 49?
He's got 2. He's got a 48 Bowman. But the 48, 49, or 49 or 48, it's been called both. Leaf is the more expensive one, just like with the Spawn. As much as I collect Warren Spahn, sadly, his ability to be tolerant was not that great. That's a story for another time. But overall, yeah, the 49, the low number 49 Bowmans are not very nice cards. And the 48, 49 Leafs are pretty rough on the eyes for the amount of money they ask you to shell out for them. But yeah, if money were no object, I'd snap up absolutely a Robinson rookie. I mean, what am I talking about? 48, 40.
We're getting some other suggestions coming in here from the viewers. You got the 50-51 Toleteros.
Jobs Gibson. Where were the Toleteros from, Modern Vintage Collector? Do you happen to know? It sounds, 47 Bond Bread. I actually have some Bond Bread 47s. They're not Jackie Robinson, though. Sadness and woe. A 47 Bond Bread Robinson. The earliest Robinson I have ever seen was a 1946 cabinet card from Montreal that a gentleman with only Jackie stuff had. And I almost said, hey, Bowman 1951, want to go halvesies on a really cool piece of memorabilia that we can say we both own?
Why didn't you?
Because I was stupid.
All right. Well, we're looking for that at the National this year then, right?
Actually, sadly, I will not be able to go to the National, but I know you're going to do a good job. I am going to be traveling. So my esteemed partner in life is going to be presenting at a conference in San Diego, and I've been asked by her to go with her.
All right, I'll give you a pass. San Diego's much nicer than Atlantic City.
Thanks very much. Yeah, and now listen, don't worry. I'll bring you back lots of tacos. I'll freeze dry them and everyone.
You got your answer on the Toleteros.
The Toleteros. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't know what a toletero is, and I speak Spanish pretty well.
Well, your answer's up there on the screen.
Yeah, from the DR, but I don't know what a toletero is. I've never heard that word, but they're from the DR. Hey, thanks, Snoop, for the good vibes on Dihigo. Yeah, he was a phenomenal pitcher, and I wish I could have seen him. It certainly would have been something else.
All right. Well, really appreciate everybody sticking around for this. It's over an hour. I can't believe it. It doesn't feel like that at all. But
yeah, holy Christmas.
Again, Professor FiddleAnthem for hanging out tonight. And
you're most welcome.
We'll get back on the channel again at some point with a new topic.
Good, because I mean, all these books are going to get heavy. You know, I mean, look at these. Peace. Always. Have a good night, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone. Bowman1951 out.